and we had the 2 stock tune with just a catback. It wasn't even catback. Was it a catback? I don't know. Catback? I'm not sure if it was just an axle back or a catback. Regardless, let's restart. Hello and welcome back to Stratified, and we've got a really neat comparison today that honestly I don't know what the outcome of this, so let's videotape it and find out. So what we've got here is a 2019 STI. Now this STI happens to not be tuned and not be modified other than a catback and some nice aesthetic mods. It's got the early gen wheels. It's got the squash flavor inside, so that's at least worth a couple of horsepower. And behind us, we've got a 2021 STI. Beautiful blue STI, also just catback and no tune, no other mods. Now, as you know, Subaru kind of maxed out this platform starting with the 2019 year. They maxed it out in terms of performance, stock performance on the engine. So these two gentlemen over here behind us have brought their cars out as part of a charity event, actually, from the Vancouver Subaru Club, and they are graciously allowing us to tune their car. And not only that, they're going to find out how much power they're making, and we're going to find out how much power they're making and to see if there's any discrepancy really between the two. So without further ado, we're going to strap these guys down and find out. So Eddie and Brian, their STIs, you got Eddie's STI over here, it is the 2019, and Brian's STI here is the 2021. So Eddie, tell me a little bit about your passion for Subaru that you mentioned, and why this car for you?
The STI is always one of my dream cars, and actually bringing into the community, I realized how good the Subaru community is, and everybody gather around on a Friday night meet, and you know, just making new friends, enjoying the same passion as other Subaru owners as well. And this car has bring more joy and more fun every day, every time I drive it. So, yeah.
Yeah, these are the kind of things that we hear from a lot of owners, and actually that's what it's all about, right? Like, yeah. Regardless of what it makes today, just looking at it, I can see that you've obviously put a lot of passion and a lot of love into the car, yeah. And it shows. How about you, Brian? What's your Subaru story?
Well, honestly, when I was first getting the car, like, I was thinking of getting a manual. First time, I learned manual on this car.
Okay.
Yeah, so my buddy had an STI, right? So like he really loved the car. I saw how the community, and then I was like, there really isn't like any other manual car, maybe the Type R around this price. So it really like you said, the community and all, that really brought me to this car. So I really enjoy it.
All right, so now let's get into the dyno predictions. Eddie, what do you think? I'm
gonna push about 263 on the dyno.
263, okay. Yeah. Okay. So you know it's a bit of a heartbreaker, right?
Yeah, I know. But just because on the websites and whatever, they've been pushing about 260, I think.
Okay.
So I'm gonna say 263 on this, and I don't know. I'll hopefully get 263.
Okay, 263, and
Brian? You know, 265. You know, 2-year difference. You know,
yeah.
2 horsepower difference.
Extra 2 horsepower. All right. So you guys both agree that the blue one will be a little stronger.
Yeah, I think so. I think the blue one's gonna be stronger. I don't know, just because has all the Type RA motor and stuff too. So.
Okay.
Yeah, we're gonna see.
We're gonna see, yeah, exactly. All right. So, once again, without further ado, let's get these cars rolling. So the important thing here is that we're consistent with the pulls. We've got a fan set up in the front there, and the fans, we actually have a fan that's directing air directly on the top mount, which is important to make sure you cool these cars properly. And we got these fans pushing air onto the radiators. So We want to make sure we're consistent and we're replicating the road conditions as much as possible in these cars.
On to Subaru number 2 here. So this is the 2021. This is the last embodiment of the STI as at least as we currently know it. And looking at the super clean engine bay, it's got what, not even 10,000 miles of mileage, right? Under 15,000 kilometers. And it is minty. Minty and factory fresh. The previous car to 2019 had about 40,000 kilometers, so 30,000 miles or so, just under 30,000 miles. And this one's even fresher. We'll see if that translates into anything more in terms of power.
First of all, let's talk about Eddie's car. So the 2019, 40,000 kilometers, about 30,000 miles on it, and this is the final pull. I want to compare final pull to final pull because I think that is the most fair. So here you go, you're gonna see the power number, and you are very, very close in your estimate. I think your estimate is 261.
Yeah.
So 259. Now, if we kind of delve in a little bit deeper into how things looked. So this is your torque line, the yellow line, and then this is your horsepower line. Now, what you'll notice here is that you've got certain dips. One dip is here, and then an even bigger dip here, and then a drop off here. So usually dips like this and this are from knock. So the ECU is detecting some knock and it's pulling back some timing, and then you're gonna see a dip there. It's interesting that the car pulls power pretty sharply here, and I'm gonna contrast that to Brian's car. So it's a little bit different between the two, but basically you've got a pretty solid power line or power curve. This is a 14-second pull, so it's a pretty long pull on the dyno. You're running fairly high quality fuel, and there is a little bit of knock on top. So when you go and you tune the car, what I do is I would smooth this out and try and maximize everywhere while maintaining, like preventing these kind of drops.
Okay.
So effectively, that's what tuning would do. When you add flow parts to the car, like intake, more exhaust parts, etc., what you're doing is you're going to allow the engine to breathe a little better, less pumping losses, so your power goes up. Now, these late generation STIs, they're almost at the limit of the fuel system, so there isn't a whole heck of a lot of power up top that can be added. There's also at the limit of the turbocharger. So what our goal is, if we tune it, is to just get rid of the dips and make it that it's a nice strong pull all the way to redline. So now let's look at Brian's car. And you made a little bit more power. Now, you had estimated 263,
yeah.
You're within 4 horsepower of that. Now, when I pull this up, you're like, oh, am I looking at Brian's car or am I looking at Eddie's car? Because you can see that the curves are very, very similar. There's this kind of like characteristic dip that we see here, and then there's a dip here as well, right around that 5,500 RPM range, which seems to be part of either knock, ECU calibration, kind of their strategies. But the interesting thing about your car is that it didn't have the drop off right at the very end. And here is where most of your horsepower difference comes from, because he peaked like there, and then you peaked, you know, just there. So it's just a little bit. I mean, how much are you going to spend driving in that region? Probably not, not a heck of a lot. Now, I overlaid the two power curves together here. So Brian's car is this solid line, and Eddie's car is the dotted line. Now, if you look at the two up to this point, which is 5,500 RPM, you can see that they are essentially identical. There's basically almost nothing to tell them apart. The air-fuel ratios are a little bit richer on your car, but it also could be how the exhaust is set up and how the sensor's picking it up, because we're picking it up at the very end, right, of the exhaust. But in terms of, like, you can tell that this is the same calibration, effectively, and the same motor. Up top here is where there seems to be a tiny little bit of difference. So your drop off is not as abrupt as Eddie's drop off. There's still a drop off on both, but on Eddie's car it's a little bit more drop off. And again, remember how I told you that you're making your peak horsepower right there at the very end of the graph, and he's making it right here. That last 100 or 200 RPM, it seems that the 2019 car just pulls back, and it doesn't look like it's knock. I think it's honestly just a slight tweak to the ECU that they're pulling down boost a little bit sooner in the 29 expectation for the red line in the 2019 car versus the 2021. And I think I'm not sure where they rated it to have like 5 extra horsepower, because they went through like 305 to 310. And this, you know what, this little trick may just be it. In real world driving, you're really never gonna see that. So I think it's super neat to see the two cars, you know, the span of a couple of years, and see such consistent power. So yeah, your engines are pretty much performing the same, the calibrations are pretty much the same, and they're both pulling strong. So now that the dust has cleared and we saw what stock tune, no mods, just catback cars did on our dyno, let's put this into perspective and see what an STI does with the stock turbo when some tuning and some mods are applied. So we happen to have this car here that we tuned a little while ago. What is also a 2019. And I'm just going to bring up Brian's, which was the strongest of the two. I'm gonna bring up his power curve, and you can see the dashed line here, the stock car versus, so this is the stock car torque, and this is the stock car horsepower, versus what a fully bolted pump gas STI does. Now, there's a couple of caveats. This older dyno tune that we didn't have our better fuel, which these two cars were on, so we only had a worse quality fuel of no ethanol. So that limited kind of what we could do on pump gas. So this is pump gas to pump gas. But you can see a few things right away. First of all, the tuned and modified cars, and by modified I mean intake, full exhaust, and had a header. Still stock turbo. So you can see that not only it ramped up faster in boost, but it held more torque across the board. You can see that up here it made power as well, made additional power. So we're talking about a 20-25 horsepower and about 40 foot-pounds of torque. And that was also with upgraded injectors. So these cars, the STIs, they will need a fuel system upgrade for significant power upgrades. You can do something like a simple bolt-on, you can do an intake, you can do an exhaust on it. But once you start to get a little bit more serious or into ethanol fuels, you do need those 1050 injectors in there, because the fuel system runs out. So because this car had those injectors, we're also able to do an ethanol flex fuel tune on it, and I'm just gonna overlay that with a dotted line so you can see what you can really do when you get increased octane. So once again, there's a big jump in performance. So the dotted line is the same car as a solid line, but with ethanol in the tank. And now if we were to do a little comparison here, kind of around the peak torque point, so you can see that the ethanol tune was about 340 the non-ethanol pump gas was about 280, and then the stock tune was about 240, maybe 250. So that's kind of the peak torque gains, but you can see that those gains are held across the board, and the most impressive gains are made in the horsepower department, where you can really carry a lot more power. On our stingy dyno, it did make 324 to the wheels on ethanol, stock turbo, versus a lot less what you saw we had with the stock cars. So this is what you'd call kind of the stock turbo maximized on the STI, and the drivetrain still remains reliable. The car is a ton of fun. You get a lot of area under the curve, but what you need for it is bolt-ons. What you need for it is a fuel system upgrade and to run that ethanol to really maximize the STI drivetrain. So hopefully this puts into perspective a little bit what you can expect when you modify and tune your STI. There's a lot of power to be made without swapping out your turbo, and if you do choose to swap out your turbo, that's a whole different, maybe we'll do a different video on that altogether, and you can make more than even this ethanol power on pump gas with a bigger turbo, of course. So hopefully this was informative, and hopefully this keeps you guys excited for more projects and more videos. Give us some feedback on what you'd like to see, and catch you next time.